Hi kids, good morning. Remember last week we did these sounds and we are going to revise it. From there we'll go to our class of today. Last week we treat these sounds and they said identify the picture and say the sound of the first letter. Okay, now the first letter, what can you see here? We have the first object is apple. You can see an apple. And how does an apple start? We have apple, 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 and this is the sound ah. The second picture, what can you see? You can see a cow. You can see a cow. And how does a cow, the first letter of a cow starts with k, cow, cow. Next, we have a small hot here. We have a hot. And what's the sound of the first sound? The first letter of a hot is hot. Next, we have, you can see a tap here. And the first letter of a tap is t, 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 t. Next, we have ant. We can see an ant. And how does the first letter goes? Ant. Ant. Next, we can see a car. You can see a car. And how does a car goes? The first letter of a car is car. Car. Next, we have a house. And what's the first letter of a house? We have house. Next, we can see a toy. How does a toy start? With t, 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 toy. Now, you can see down there, say write the beginning letter of the sound. Okay, you're going to write the beginning letter of each sound here. You look at the object and you write the beginning letter of the object. Now the first object, what can you see here? You can see an axe. An axe. And how does axe spell? The first letter of an axe, we have axe. Axe. You put your letter A here. Next, we have a cow. Cow. And what's the first letter of a cow? Cow. Cow. Next, what can we see? A hen. A hen. And how does a hen sound? The first letter of a hen, we have hen. Hen. Next, we can see a tap. And what's the first letter of a tap? The first letter of a tap, we have t, 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 tap. Next, we have 10. And what's the first letter of 10? T, 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 10. Next, we can see a hammer. A hammer. So how does a hammer sound? Hammer. Next, we can see an apple. Apple. Next, we have a toy. Toy. Next, you can see a cup. Cup. Next, they say the name of the picture and circle the first letter sound. Say the name of the picture and circle the first letter sound. Use the letter A, K, and T as a guide. Say the sound of the letter. Now you are going to say, look at the picture you say the first letter sound, like the picture, the first picture you can see a hammer. And what's the letter sound, the first letter of a hammer? We have, you see, it's already circled here. And this is the sound. The next we can see a cat. The first letter of a cat, we have cat. We circle the first letter. Next we have a hand. You can see a hand here. And what's the first letter? Hand. Next we can see a hat. A hat. And what's the first letter? Hat. You circle it. Next we have a telephone. We can see a telephone. What's the first letter? Telephone. Next we can see a toy. Toy. Next we have ant. And what's the first letter? Ant. Next we have a house. We can see a house, and the first letter of a house is house. Next we can see a cow. The first sound of a cow, we have cow. Next we have a tap. You can see a tap. The first sound of a tap, we have tap. Next a cup. The first sound of a cup, cup. Next an apple. Apple. Very good. Now the lesson for today, we are going to treat another sound. These are the sound. The first sound, I. Again, I and S. Now the exercise says identify the picture and say the sound of the first letter. We are to identify the picture and say the sound of the first letter. Now what picture can we see here? The first picture, we have a fan. A fan. And what's the first letter of a fan? The first sound of a fan is next we can see an insect. An insect. So the first sound of an insect, we have I. Next we have a parrot. We can see a parrot. The first sound of a parrot is parrot. Next we can see a sun. Sun. And the first sound of a sun is S. 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 Sun. S. S. Sun. Next, we can see the next object is a fish. And what's the first sound of a fish? Fish. Fish. The next one, we have ink. And the first sound of the first letter sound of an ink is I. The next object, we have a pig. And the first letter sound of a pig is the next we can see a snail. A snail. So the first letter sound is S, as in snail. Snail. Now the exercise says draw a circle around the first letter of each picture and say the sound. Again, draw a circle around the first letter of each picture and say the sound. We are going to draw a circle around the first letter of each object here. Now the first object, we can see a flag, and the first letter sound of a flag we have, it is circle here already. You circle it. The next one, we have a pex. We can see a pex. And how does a pex? What's the first letter sound of a pex? And this is a sound. We circle it. The next one is sun. We can see a sun, and what's the first letter sound? Sun. We circle the first letter sound, which is s. Next, we have ink. What's the first letter sound of an ink? Ink. Next, we have a pencil. And what's the first letter sound of a pencil? We circle it. We circle the sound. The next, we have a frog. We can see a frog here, and the first letter sound of a frog we have frog. Next, we have a fork. A fork. And what's the first letter sound of a fork? Fork. The next object here, we can see a snake. And what's the first letter sound of a snake? We have snake. Snake. Thank you. We have come to the end of the class of today. Thank you. See you in our next lesson.